So, good morning, everybody. I'd like to begin by thanking D'Angelo for inviting me to participate in this event. It's truly an honour to be among such an accomplished group of presenters. And the work and time and dedication D'Angelo puts into all these events is truly awe-inspiring, and I just think it's an indispensable and vital part of this community. So if we could all give D'Angelo a round of applause. My name is Declan McCarthy. I've had a few articles. Am I close enough to the mic? Can people hear me okay? It's all good? I'm quite tall, so. That's brilliant, thank you. My name is Declan McCarthy. I've had a few articles published on Housework over the years, and last February I contributed a thread to the Artificial Age Prince Twitter thread series that concerned the album's opening track, Artificial Cage, which some of you may have seen last year. However, to call myself a writer of any variety would be to vastly overstate the levels of my productivity. I don't really write an awful lot, but whenever I do find the time to do any Prince-related writing, I'm principally preoccupied with the interplay of form and content within the context of Prince's vast body of work. And by this I mean examining the lyrical and musical components of a particular song and interrogating the relationship that these two elements exert upon each other within the context of that composition, and how that can aid us in our understanding of the central message or core meaning of a particular song. And today I'll be applying that mode of critical engagement to the time track 7779311 in my presentation entitled Keeping Time with the Time, Rhythm, Rejection, and 7779311. So I think it's fair to say that of the 6 tracks that appear on the Times' second full-length studio album, What Time Is It?, 7779311 is probably the most celebrated song that appears on the album. That's very much reputation it's maintained in the 40 years since the album was released in 1982. While authorship of the track is officially credited to the Times frontman and lead vocalist Morris Day, as is the case with much of the group's early material, it's widely understood that Prince actually wrote the music, wrote the song, and likewise in terms of the iteration that appears on the album, Prince likewise performed much of the instrumentation, aside from the vocal duties which were assumed by Morris Day. Much of the popularity the track has enjoyed in the 40 years since the album was released, it can largely be attributed to the fairly intricate Linn LM-1 drum pattern upon which the track is principally based. However, while the technical intricacy of this complex rhythm pattern has received a great deal of critical engagement in those 40 years, the lyrical contingent of 7779311 has largely languished in a state of critical neglect. In his 40th anniversary retrospective on What Time Is It?, John Murph lyrically characterises 7779311 as standard issue pop fodder, namely the pursuit of carnal pleasure. While within the broader context of popular music, the lyrical concerns of 7779311 do appear somewhat pedestrian. When contrasted within the larger lyrical landscape of What Time Is It?, they are actually quite strikingly singular. So this depicted here is the lyrics to 7779311 as they appear in the album's liner notes. It's worth noting that this version of the lyrics that appear in the liner notes don't transcribe anything Morris sings beyond the 2-minute 30 mark. So Morris sings more beyond this point, but this is what is presented to us in the album's liner notes. While a cursory survey of the track's lyrical content does not appear to reveal anything immediately noteworthy or untoward, as always, the devil is in the detail. At a surface level, the track traverses fairly familiar lyrical territory for the time, with Morris Day attempting to seduce an unnamed member of the opposite sex into being his lover for the evening. From this perspective, 7779311 is not too dissimilar from tracks such as Get It Up or Oh Baby from the Times' self-titled debut, and likewise bears somewhat of a striking resemblance to Chili Sauce, which would subsequently appear on the group's follow-up album to What Time Is It?, Ice Cream Castle. However, what distinguishes 7779311 from its seeming thematic counterparts is the distinctly conditional nature of much of the track's lyrical content. Lyrically, the track is almost entirely made up of questions. In the transcribed lyrics, only the repeated request of "Baby, what's your phone number?" is actually punctuated with a question mark, as you can see here. But there are other lyrics within the body of the text, within the body of the song, that are questioned but aren't punctuated accordingly here. So lines such as, how can you be reached on a lonely night? That is a question, but it's not followed here with a question mark. Or how can I get into you when I'm feeling right? Again, not punctuated with a question mark, but is implicitly a question. Even statements that at first appear declarative, like I want to spend the night with you, are then subsequently undermined with qualifications such as if that's all right. Crucially, however, these are questions that we as listeners and Morris don't receive any answers to throughout the duration of the song. I think it's actually quite interesting that 777 is very much of a piece with The Walk and Wild and Loose in these sort of extended jam songs, and 777 is the only song on the album not to feature any female voices in that respect, and I think that's quite an interesting distinction. We can infer that the titular 777-9311 of the chorus is an answer to the repeated question, baby, what's your phone number? But even then, the chorus proceeds to raise two more questions, which further go unanswered, and as such, we receive no sense of closure or resolution to these questions. As an aside, it's also worth noting that the telephone number that serves as the title for 777-9311 was in actual fact the telephone number of Prince's then guitarist, Des Dickerson. After the subsequent commercial success of 777-9311, Dickerson had to ultimately change his phone number due to a large number of people calling the number. There's a quite humorous comment from Jesse Johnson, the Times guitarist, on a later slide. And of course, later on today, Arthur will be giving us a very Des-centric presentation, which I'm sure we're all very much looking forward to. So this preponderance of unanswered questions at a lyrical level creates a certain atmosphere of uncertainty and tension. And even in the bridge of the song, Morris even floats the idea of rejection as a possibility, which only further serves to throw his entire amorous endeavor into question and amplifies this palpable sense of uncertainty. This profound sense of tension is foregrounded as a specifically sexual kind of tension, with the euphemistic plea that closes each chorus, can I come tonight? Within this context, the term come functions simultaneously as the word to arrive or reach a place, or is the colloquial term for a sexual climax. As such, Morris is simultaneously asking to rendezvous with this unnamed woman at an unspecified location, and is likewise requesting for sexual release. The fact that Morris and we as listeners never receive an answer to his repeated euphemistic request only further amplifies the latent sexual tension present in the lyrical landscape of 777-9311. In this respect, 777-9311 stands alone when contrasted with the surrounding material on the album. In order for us to see what makes the track so singular, we need only look to the two compositions that accompany the track on side one of What Time Is It? Preceding 777 in the track listing, at a surface level, Wild and Loose is largely preoccupied with the same notions of carnal pleasure as 777-9311, with Morris enumerating the qualities that prospective groupies for the time should possess. However, what separates Wild and Loose from 777-9311 is the overall tone of confidence the track lyrically articulates. It fundamentally lacks any of the uncertainty and unresolved tension that pervades 777. The chorus of Wild and Loose is, The chorus of Wild and Loose opens with the lyric, Wild and Loose, that's how it's got to be, which is a confident declarative statement. It's not Wild and Loose, that's how I'd like it to be, or Wild and Loose, that's how it's got to be if you wouldn't mind. Compare and contrast this with the aforementioned qualification of I want to spend the night with you if that's all right, and the difference in tone is abundantly clear. Furthermore, unlike 777, the lyrical landscape of which is largely populated with questions, within the runtime of Wild and Loose there are very few questions posed, the main one being the fairly rhetorical and braggadocious, guess what I did last night? Likewise, the track that follows 777 in the running order, One Day I'm Gonna Be Somebody, strikes a similar tone of supreme confidence. Dispensing with the amorous preoccupations of Wild and Loose and 777, One Day I'm Gonna Be Somebody is instead a confident song of self-affirmation and financial aspiration, where there is little to no doubt in the mind of the singer, Morris, as to whether he will be able to achieve his dream. The title and repeated refrain of the track is One Day I'm Gonna Be Somebody, not One Day I Hope to Be Somebody, or one day I'd really like to be somebody, it is utterly devoid of any sense of uncertainty and stands in stark contrast with the tone of 777. As such, when situated within this broader lyrical context, the overriding sense of uncertainty and sexual tension that pervades 777-9311 separates the track from the material featured elsewhere on What Time Is It? However, while 777-9311 certainly lyrically stands alone within the wider context of the album, it likewise musically and rhythmically distinguishes itself from the musical content featured elsewhere on What Time Is It? Principally via the intricate Linn LM-1 drum pattern upon which the majority of its track is rhythmically based. So in his aforementioned 40th anniversary retrospective on What Time Is It? John Murph succinctly and evocatively describes the hypnotic rhythm pattern of 777-9311 as a syncopated kick drum groove, embellished with a skittering hi-hat, a punchy offbeat snare, and crisp electronic claps on the 2 and 4. It is also worth noting here that Murph reiterates the often repeated claim that the intricate drum pattern of 777 was in fact a stock drum beat, programmed into the Linn LM-1 drum machine by Tower of Power drummer David Garibaldi. This claim originates from a post made to Facebook by the Times then guitarist Jesse Johnson in March 2014, where he revealed the origins of the track's intricate rhythm pattern, and there you can see is Jesse's comments about Dez's home phone number. Johnson's claim was later corroborated by former member of the Time and acclaimed record producer Jimmy Jam during his Red Bull Academy music lecture in December 2016 with fellow former member of the Time Terry Lewis. Much like Johnson, Jam reiterated that the beat for 777 actually originated from a stock rhythm pattern programmed into the Linn LM-1 by Garibaldi. However, in order for us to discern what makes 777 so rhythmically singular within the broader context of What Time Is It? It is first necessary for us to briefly explore and define the broader rhythmic landscape of the surrounding album. In order for us to do this, we need to look no further than the album's aforementioned opening track, Wild and Loose. Using the music production and performance software Ableton Live, the above graphic roughly transcribes the drum pattern upon which Wild and Loose is predominantly based. In order for us to get a clearer audible picture of what this transcription sounds like from a performance perspective, the following audio recording repeats this rhythmic sequence 4 times. What I would particularly like to draw attention to here is the placement of the first kick drum beat within the phrase, so the bottom line of this graphic. Which occurs, and this opening kick drum beat occurs on the very first opening beat of the sequence. Rhythmically, we would refer to this first beat as the 1. Furthermore, this opening kick drum beat serves as a kind of musical anchor for all the other instruments utilized in the song, with the bass, synthesizer, and rhythm guitar all entering Wild and Loose in lockstep with this opening kick drum beat. For the sake of time, I won't be delving too deeply into the scientific or theoretical reasoning behind this, but needless to say, rhythmically stressing the 1 in this way is the manner in which a great deal of Western popular music rhythmically operates. As such, we have largely become accustomed to hearing the first beat of a measure of music stressed in some shape or form, and consequently, it does not sound particularly unusual or out of place to our ears, and ultimately creates a kind of rhythmic regularity upon which we can musically depend to provide a reliable background beat. Putting aside 777-9311 momentarily, while the other 5 tracks featured on What Time Is It are based on unique rhythms, it is certainly true that each of these 5 songs can also be characterized by rhythmically emphasizing the 1 via a kick drum beat in the manner illustrated above. And as such, the drum pattern of Wild and Loose is broadly indicative of how What Time Is It generally operates from a rhythmic perspective. And is in this respect that 777 distinguishes itself from the surrounding material featured on What Time Is It? Once again, the above graphic uses Ableton Live to transcribe the Linn LM-1 drum pattern upon which 777 is predominantly based, isolating only the kick drum and cabasa components of the sequence. Likewise, the following audio clip repeats this pictured sequence 4 times in order for us to get a better picture of what this sequence sounds like in practice. For those of you who are familiar with the track, you will immediately recognize that this is the sparsely instrumented manner in which the track actually begins. On top of this, Prince proceeds to layer these skittering hi-hats, a punchy offbeat snare, and crisp electronic claps on the 2 and 4 that Murph so evocatively described in the extract featured earlier in this presentation. I've excluded those subsequent elements from the above transcription, primarily because I believe they cause confusion when attempting to discern the manner in which 777 largely rhythmically functions, with the kick drum contingent of the sequence becoming somewhat buried in the mix as the track progresses and the levels of instrumentation increases. Once again, I'd like to draw your attention to the placement of the opening kick drum beat of this sequence, and you will all have undoubtedly noticed that unlike Wild and Loose and the surrounding material on What Time Is It, that opening kick drum beat is no longer occurring on the 1 and has instead been slightly displaced. This practice of stressing weaker beats within a measure of music is commonly referred to as syncopation, and is a rhythmic feature of a lot of funk-based music, among other genres. By displacing the first kick drum beat in this manner, 7779311 somewhat rhythmically disorientates us as listeners. We instinctively expect this opening kick drum beat to occur on the 1, but it instead occurs a fraction of a second later, and as listeners, we can immediately feel that latency and the somewhat off-kilter, unexpected rhythm it consequently creates. Furthermore, much like the opening kick drum beat of Wild and Loose, this syncopated kick drum beat likewise serves as the musical anchor for much of the instrumentation of 777, with the track's rhythm guitar, bass, and even Morris's vocals all striking in lockstep with this displaced and syncopated opening beat, which imbues the entire song with a notable sense of rhythmic and musical latency. While this syncopation at a rhythmic and musical level does amplify the track's inherently funky nature, it simultaneously creates a landscape of musical tension, with our brains expecting the first beat of the phrase to fall on the 1, and consequently being somewhat thrown when the first kick drum beat occurs a fraction of a second later than we expect, which confuses our sense of internal rhythm and contributes to the unique and fascinating rhythmic landscape of 777. It is a profoundly palpable sense of musical tension that is rhythmically and musically lacking from the surrounding material featured on What Time Is It, and is a tension that we as listeners are never musically released from, a syncopated drum pattern serving as the rhythmic bedrock upon which the track's near 8-minute runtime is entirely based. As such, as listeners, we find ourselves in a comparable situation to the one Morris finds himself in lyrically. In much the same way that Morris never receives any answers to the questions he poses to his prospective lover, and consequently never receives any release from the sexual tension that lyrically pervades 7779311, we likewise never receive any release from the rhythmic tension the very musical structure of the track creates. As such, from a critical perspective, we find ourselves in a situation where the musical and lyrical components of 7779311 are collectively working in tandem to carve out a specific emotional landscape, with the overriding sense of uncertainty and pent-up sexual tension that 7779311 lyrically evokes, likewise being manifested at a musical level. In his OK Player article concerning the piece, Elijah C. Watson proclaims 7779311 to be Prince's best song. Whether 7779311 deserves to be the sole recipient of such an honorific title is, of course, a matter for debate, and there are certainly a number of equally deserving contenders waiting in the wings. However, what is certainly true is that within the annals of his extensive back catalogue, 7779311 stands tall as one of Prince's most profound unifications of form and content. Emotionally and sexually, the lyrical landscape of 7779311 is one defined by sexual tension through its preponderance of questions, and as we have demonstrated, this palpable sense of tension is likewise inherently manifested at a musical level in an inextricable manner. What I hope this presentation has primarily illustrated is what can be gained from taking a closer look at the musical and lyrical components of Prince's work, and how such an exercise can ultimately shed further light on Prince's supreme level of artistry. I likewise hope that I've been able to add something of value to the critical discourse surrounding this track and the accompanying album, and I would very much like to thank D'Angelo once again for this tremendous opportunity, as well as all of you for your time and attention this morning. Thank you.
Yes, sir.